Nadine Maenza is up next, but first, some news. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court gave the Trump administration permission to enforce its toughest restriction yet on asylum seekers at the southern border. The government can now refuse to consider asylum requests from anyone who failed to apply for it before coming to the United States. Migrants from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador now cannot seek asylum in the U.S. if they didn't first ask for it in Mexico. Most people crossing the southern border are Central Americans. The shift reverses decades of U.S. policy. The administration says it wants to close the time gap between initial screening and a final decision on asylum. Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor dissented, saying the court acted too quickly and should allow the case to work its way through the lower courts. Also this week, the Trump administration wants to cut the number of refugees allowed into the United States this year. How will these tough restrictions affect refugees who are fleeing real religious persecution? And what message does it send to the rest of the world? Joining me now to discuss is Vice Chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, Nadine Maenza. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Last year, the administration capped the refugee program at 30,000, and that was down from 45,000 in 2018. Since 2016, the number of refugees is down 71%, Nadine. Now, it seems the administration is looking to take that number from 30,000 to zero. Your thoughts on why this is happening?
Well, we know that the administration is trying to make that decision right now, so there are people that have different opinions that are meeting together to discuss that, and that's why we at the Commission decided now is the right time for us to weigh in to make our own recommendation. We're created as a bipartisan, independent government body, and our mandate is to make recommendations to our own government. So we're recommending that they don't zero out the refugee cap.
Why not?
Because we feel for a couple different reasons. First of all, in terms of our advocacy for religious freedom, it will make it very difficult for the State Department or the Commission when we go overseas and we advocate for religious minorities to say to a government to value those minorities, value those Christians, the other minorities in your country. They have dignity. They deserve to have a role in your government when we won't take any of them.
Now, the administration, and I've spoken to some officials throughout the government, they claim this is a national security concern, that they're concerned about that.
We definitely recommend vetting. Right now, it's a couple years before a refugee can come to the United States, and then the United States, it goes through a process where they vet them themselves. So I think it's easy for us to misunderstand a refugee from someone who's displaced and fleeing war or fleeing violence. A refugee is somebody that can't go back. They're somebody that are fleeing something pretty severe, that they've been given that special status.
Yeah. I want to give people an insight into the number of refugees seeking asylum due to religious persecution. According to World Relief, the number of Muslims is down 90% in the past 3 years, and there's been a 47% drop in Christian refugees. In addition, there's 72% decrease in Christians from the 50 countries on the World Watch List in which Christians face the most persecution. Now, this seems to contradict the administration's goal, Nadine, of protecting and promoting religious freedom and religious minorities.
We would really like the administration, as they decide what this number is, to just consider that fact that we've had these two ministerials focusing on religious freedom.
Right.
We are a leader fighting for religious freedom, and having a zero refugee cap in particular would be harmful for that work that we do that's so important. There has never been an administration better on religious freedom, more forceful than this administration. So we at the Commission are so pleased by that, and we really don't want us to hurt our own efforts by making such a drastic decision.
Now, I've spoken also to some administration officials when I heard you were coming on, and they say, look, we're trying to send the resources to the region where these people are being displaced so that they can stay in that region and hopefully one day go back. And they feel that's more cost effective and frankly safer for the refugee and the people in the United States to keep them in the region. Your response to that?
Well, certainly if people want to stay in the region and can stay in the region, they can go back. We're not disagreeing that, of course, we don't want every religious minority to leave the Middle East, for instance. But I was just in Jordan meeting with, I was just in Iraq and then in Jordan, and I met with some Iraqi Christian refugees. And they haven't been able to go back. It's not safe.
Even the groups specifically identified by the United States, Christians and Yazidis in Iraq, in Syria. During 2016, the U.S. admitted 1,500 Iraqi Christians and 417 Yazidis. So far this year, They've admitted 41 Christians and 9 Yazidis.
Exactly, and we did designate that violence as genocide, which does raise it to a level that demands a different action from us. So we do feel like these would be contributing citizens. But we also think vetting is important, and no one is suggesting that's not.
So where is the disconnect? Because on the one hand, you've got Mike Pompeo doing his ministerials. We covered that. You've got a true renewed attention to religious freedom and persecution. But yet there seems to be this blind spot on allowing religious refugees into the country.
Well, we're hoping that once they do make their decision, it won't be inconsistent, which is why we've decided to weigh in, because we do agree that it does fit our values to allow people that are fleeing. I mean, you're talking about pastors from China, from Iran, North Korea, Uyghur Muslims that are able to escape a concentration camp. In China, is there no place in the United States for them? And I'll be honest, when we cut our refugee numbers in the past, the United Nations told us everyone cut their numbers. So if we think other countries are going to pick up the slack, they're not. They're going to follow our lead, which means these people will have to live their whole lives in refugee camps, and their children will, and they will be the underclass. They will never get the education they deserve. So the consequence of that, and of course radicalization in those instances as well. So there's all sorts of reasons that that's not a good idea.
Well, and this is civil society. We have to remember, many of these people fleeing religious persecution, this is the civilization and the greatest hope in some cases for these regions.
Yeah.
If you isolate them and put them in refugee camps, you're killing the future.
Exactly, and we know that if we lead and all the other countries also accept some refugees, there are places for a lot of these people to start over, the ones that can't go back.
There are reports the administration is saying, look, we've had to divert our resources where we would normally deal with refugees. We've had to focus on asylum seekers at the southern border. And that's where we're spending our money, our energy, our people, and our time. Your response? I
think we can do both. I think we're a really great country. The program, the way it's set up now, is their costs are covered when they fly over, but they have to repay them. We should be bringing people that can go to work, that can join our community. And this family I met in Iraq, the mother is a hairdresser, the father is a teacher. They would contribute to the society. They'd come here and they would work, they'd pay taxes, and we feel like that you can do both.
What happened to the administration's priority? I distinctly remember President Trump running on a platform of saying, we're going to give preference to Christian refugees seeking escape from this Middle East horror and the Islamic terror they're facing in those countries. What happened to that promise? I know the courts battered him around a bit.
Well, a little bit too with the United Nations, the way that it works. A lot of times they go through and they make a list of the refugees that they're resettling, and they go to the camps, and that's where it starts. And a lot of the Christians aren't in those settings, so they don't get included in that. So that's definitely, the whole process is something we should take a look at.
Now, there are two plans at play according to reports. One, they want to halve the number of refugees in this upcoming year. The other would end them and bring them to zero, giving the president the ability to waive that in certain emergency cases. Which of those scenarios do you like?
Yeah, we would prefer that it not even be cut in half. We think 30, which is where it is right now, is pretty low as it is.
And 15,000 you think would be unacceptable?
So low. Certainly zero is we're hoping is an unacceptable, that's just a negotiating ploy, but we're hoping that it will be higher than that. But we do hope that they will make room for all those fleeing persecution.
Where is the need most urgent? I mean, you all study this, watch it. Which regions of the world are you seeing the most need? Well,
certainly right now we're seeing a lot coming from Africa. I think those have been some of our top numbers. But there's still a need in the Middle East. We have Burma has been persecuting the Muslims there horribly, and of course China. For those that can get out. A lot of them will go to jail or disappear if they don't have somebody take them. And we're talking about if spending their life as a refugee, if they're not able to be resettled, means they usually can't work in the country they reside. Their children often can't go to school. Like right now, the Iraqi family that's in Jordan, their family, they can't work, or their children can go to school. So they're in this limbo where they can't go back because they tried to go back and they were told if you go back, more of your family will die. So they're stuck in this limbo. They're not able to be resettled in another country. They're not able to work. They're not able to go to school. So what can we offer these families? And of course, they can become part of our community. We do have room. So I think that we need to understand that there's, no one's suggesting we just open our borders and let everyone come that wants to come. This is very strategic. But we do believe there should be a room for those that are fleeing persecution.
Now, former Defense Secretary Mattis and others have been very supportive of the refugee program. And they look at this not through a humanitarian lens, but through a strategic lens, because they say, wait a minute, these are our allies on the ground. This is intelligence coming into our country that we need if we're going to be effective in the field. Your thought on that, and where is the current Defense Department?
It's really interesting you say that, because it seems they have always been the most in favor of the refugee program. It gives them the ability to reward people that have risked their life to assist them. And a lot of times it's classified. We don't know the whole stories, but we do know people like translators and others. They go into these countries, they assist them, they help them, and then they're able, and they know that they're friends of the United States, they love the United States, and they are able to resettle them there. I think for them to not have that ability to offer those, and to also be seen the same way that we're talking about, to be able to go into a country, urge the government to treat minorities with respect, urge them to treat their people well, and then to also be willing to take those that have to flee. So I do think that they probably feel like it would hurt their ability to just come in with that as well.
What would you tell the president if you could sit down with him today about these religious minorities? What do you think they're missing?
I'm not sure how. I think the president cares deeply about people of faith. He's shown that in this country, and that there's a way that we can safely have them come here, join our community, especially people fleeing persecution, that can be done safely. And they don't have to be a national security risk. No one's suggesting that. We're just suggesting that we be a place where those can come and join us.
Nadine, thank you so much
Thanks
for your input and for your clarity. We'll check in with you on this issue.
Thank you so much.
You can find out more about Nadine Maenza and the work of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom at uscirf.gov.